Welcome back to another episode of the React Native Radio podcast. Episode 311, Ignite 10 with Frank, Calise.
Hey Frank, welcome back on the show. How are you doing?
Doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, can't complain. I guess best thing to start with is, since it's just you and I, we could do a lot of sports ball talk these days. Sorry to all the non-sports ball people out there. How have the Mets been? Sorry to start probably on a bad note, I guess.
Actually, decent this year. It was a fun, wild ride through qualifying for the playoffs, and they made it in. And to the next round, and now facing rival city Philadelphia. So that'll be interesting and ugly.
Yeah, well, as it is with baseball, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm a poser Yankee fan because that's the team my wife supports, and I have no other option, or else I would be sleeping outside of the house. So here we are. Go Derek Jeter. No, he's not playing anymore. Anyways, I'm Mazen, he's Frank, and we're React Native Radio. Before we get into the topic, let's hear from our sponsor. Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote in the United States. We're a team of 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff, and have been doing this for nearly a decade. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. Okay, let's get into our topic. Ignite V10 with Frank Calise. Here we go again. So, Frank, we're getting ready, or we have released the alpha, and I assume the beta at this point for Ignite V10, and we're getting close to having the full release for Ignite. How do you feel at this stage of the process?
Pretty good. I think it was about this time last year where we released Ignite 9.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think we had that much work to do a full 10 release, but like true consultants, we invented work to do. But we really packed some good features into this release, and it feels like it progressed. And the cool part about 10 was more people from Infinite Red got involved, so that made it a more enjoyable experience on my side, and get to work with some of my team members more closely that I don't normally get to work with.
That's cool. Yeah. Are we calling it Ignite X? X plus? What is it going to be?
I didn't come up with a clever name this time. I think we're just going Ignite 10 with the Roman numeral X.
Okay. We'll see. Maybe for Ignite 11, we'll come up with something witty.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a community name contest.
Oh, it's a good idea. Yeah, I'd go for that. So what's the largest, or I should say, what's the main feature of Ignite V10?
I don't know that there's one main feature. I guess something the community's been looking for is the enhanced version of the boilerplate, in the sense of dependencies, theming, things like that. So we made a big shift from the default being Expo Go, and it is now CNG by default. So for those of you who don't know, that's continuous native generation. You can head over to the Expo docs to read more about that. But it's their recommended way to build an app and get it into production. They've, to my knowledge, never recommended Expo Go to go into the app stores, but of course you could have done it, and it worked out. But in making this shift, it allowed us to get into some of those upgrades that we would do on our client projects anyway, because you don't have to live in that Expo Go ecosystem, and you can make dependency changes more easily and things of that nature. So I would say that's the biggest core piece behind this movement.
Cool. Yeah, whenever I think of Expo Go, I always envision being able to demo your app locally, quickly, without having to deploy and all that kind of stuff, right? But also demo a limited, or should I say subset of your code, a subset of your app, right? So if you had anything native specific that's outside of Expo's core modules, and some of them don't work within Expo also, then, you kind of get to do that. In the past, whenever I was doing mentoring or teaching, I would usually do Expo Go, because for beginners, it's always easier to deploy. This is when in remote situations, kind of get them to send you their Expo Go QR code, you scan it, you get to see it. But, we are consultants and we're talking about building production level apps. Not that Expo Go can give you that, but still, we're talking about bigger features here. Expo CNG makes the most sense. Can you talk about, I also see on here that we've moved over to MMKV over async storage. I know we just released an episode with Mark Rusavi on Nitro modules, but he's also the maintainer and I guess founder of MMKV.
Yeah, so with that CNG switch, this allowed us to jump over from async storage from the React Native community package to Margello's MMKV package, which obviously you get that boost in performance, you get the synchronous calls, which is nice. And in addition to that, we do have a Reactotron plugin for MMKV. And so we made that part of the default boilerplate Reactotron setup as well. So you can inspect what's stored locally more easily. And with this change, there was an interesting nuance in the development here, because in new architecture, which Ignite should be compatible with, dependencies and having them work properly, it gets kind of crazy in depending on the package you're talking about. And MMKV, the old architecture, is supported in 2.x, but when you go to new arc, it's 3.x and further. So we had to make some adjustments to the CLI to get that right. But the cool part is that in 10, that adjustment is there. So if you throw on the new architecture flag, it will make those changes for you without you needing to think about it.
Yeah, I just had to do that for a client. V3 is a pure C++ module, which is why that's the case. Cool. So yeah, I think the next one I'm actually going to talk about, and we're going to have a larger episode around this topic, but we just wanted to highlight it. In V10, we did a lot of work and support around keyboard avoiding stuff. So I guess the TLDR on that is we leveraged React Native keyboard controller to do all the heavy lifting. This kind of seems like the best package out there that does this handling. And there was a lot of rework to the screen component, which is where this is essentially housed. And basically all that happens is you wrap your entire app with the provider. And then within the screen, you decide, we're doing the logic for you, where I did a couple test cases, right? 4 test cases. If your input is on a screen at the top of a view, if it's the bottom of a view, if it's at the top of a scroll view, if it's out of scope or out of view in a scroll view, how does it handle in those 4 scenarios? So those are all tricky situations. And I believe if you were to go into V10, that should be solved now with all that. Please open up any issues within there if you see anything.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely keyboard handling is always an issue of thorn in React Native side, and we hope to combat most of that with this change.
Yeah, and believe it or not, that's actually one of our most requested episodes. So we'll keep it at that. We'll have a full episode around this and kind of what we did and what we recommend moving forward. The next one is kind of my favorite topic, as some of you may know by now, better I18N support. Basically, we swapped out I18N JS for React I18 Next and I18 Next. Again, listen to my talk at React Universe, because I kind of go around why this is a better path. And, it's mainly because we have a larger feature set that will, let you and whoever uses Ignite leverage all the aspects needed for internationalizing your app. And as part of this work, we also opened up a cookbook recipe so that if you are an older version of Ignite, you can migrate from I18N JS to React I18 Next.
Yeah, I think that's a great addition. This major version change around, like everyone always asks, like, oh, how do I upgrade? And there's no real answer to that, because you kind of ignite your app and you're off and running, and then you're on your own. Like, you add your dependencies, you have your business logic, and you maintain it. But as these releases do come out and there are some changes, this time around we created some how-tos via the cookbook recipes, and that can maybe help you like within those migrations instead of reading Git diffs or sifting through PRs. and that sort of thing. So that's a pretty cool aspect. Next up is the refactor of the toggle component. Nothing groundbreaking here other than in our component library in Ignite, toggle was responsible for checkboxes, switches, radios, all that. You changed the view of those via the variant prop. There were some animations and things in there, so like the file's getting quite large. We refactored it to be 3 separate files, so you have your switch, radio, and checkbox files now. It's a lot easier to maintain for us.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the other things we did here was refactor the animation code. So it was using reanimated, but now it just uses core.
Why is that?
Yeah, it was just simpler, like in terms of like maybe not everyone wants to use reanimated. Now we go to it quite a lot on our projects, but we had some of the team thought that we didn't need the UI library like depending on reanimated out of the box. So we were able to strip that, and you could uninstall reanimated like at the beginning of your Ignite app if you really wanted to. And it is a very complex library. There are issues with it from time to time, so maybe that alleviates pain for some.
That's actually very cool. I just looked it up. The old toggle file was 700 lines. That's a lot to maintain, kind of scroll up and down through just to figure out, one silly fix that might come up. And I think you briefly touched on it, but I think it's also very important to highlight and kind of bring up back to the top is you could essentially kind of copy the components folder and like put it in your other projects because it is, third-party agnostic. It doesn't care about those third-party libraries. It's React Native core. You can do the changes for the animations and use reanimated or whatever it is you want to do, but we are just making it a, non-third-party dependent design system have you library where you can just do with it as you want and kind of keeps it slim along those paths. So I think that's kind of important to highlight. Next up is actually one that I believe the community was asking a lot of questions around. It's the removal of MST. So as you know, we are MST fans here at Infinite Red. Jamin is one of the maintainers of MST. MST stands for MobX State Tree. So essentially, Ignite is now similar how, component library is not dependent on third-party libraries. Ignite is no longer dependent on a state management tool. Essentially, it gives you a true boilerplate, empty starting point where you can kind of come in and add your state management library of choice. And please don't choose Redux. Oops, I said that out loud. Anyways, moving on.
Next up is another one that was always requested by the community. I think there were like 3 different issues open about this, but theme support out of the box. Ignite only really had its light theme, and since dark theme is what all the kids want these days, Mark Rickert of Infinite Red was able to implement this functionality. So he has added some hooks and context around tracking which theme is active. If it's enabled by the user or the system, you can do either one. And ways to adjust your color palettes, your spacing, anything related to the theme. And that's all working in the boilerplate demo application now, so you could see how that works. We did a part of my workshop at Chain React, dealt with these changes, just to kind of show the work involved in actually supporting another theme, because, your boss or client may just say like, oh, just activate like dark mode. How hard could it be? But it's kind of more involved. And this was another one that comes along with some cookbook recipes, and how this theme support can play nicely with third-party styling libraries like Unistyles and style components and some of the other ones out there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool to highlight. I'm a big fan of Unistyles these days, and I think the theme support setup that Mark did is very cool and pretty similar, I would say. And as everything that goes with Ignite and what we do at Infinite Red, this is not just something that Mark hand-rolled and, pushed and that was it. This was actually one that was tested at one of Mark's clients. I believe it was Mark's client. Yeah.
Yeah.
He got to use it on the client project from end to end, figure out any bugs, brought those bug fixes back into Ignite. And then, the rest of the team at InfiniRed got to weigh in on it and kind of give their feedback. And that's where this landed. So we call Ignite the battle-tested boilerplate, and that's for a reason, because we essentially do battle test it before we roll it out to the community. So you're getting good stuff out there. Tell us a little bit about the generator stuff, Frank.
So one of the probably most underrated pieces of functionality in Ignite are the generators. So if you don't know, the CLI has a way of generating your models if you're using MST, your screen components, your UI components, and basically it's like customizable templates to do some of your recurring work up front. So if like you're always importing a few things or starting your screen component out with the same header and things of that nature, like you can adjust the template and then just with a quick command on the CLI, generate a new screen or a new component in your component library or a model where you're going to store data. Part of where the generators fell short was that it had a hard-coded path in it, and it expected Ignite's directory structure to be there. So that means you have a top-level app directory where components live, screens, and things of that nature, which worked fine for if you're using Ignite. But with Expo Router becoming more and more popular, and we wanted to be able to flow that direction if that one day becomes a default or people just want to play around with it. Expo Router also uses this directory structure. Mm-hmm. So that was one thing to consider. Another consideration was I had a client that I've worked on that had a very specific like monorepo structure, and they wanted to be able to house the screens in one place and the library in another, but utilize the generators. And that wasn't very possible the way that it was. So that was another use case for this change. And basically, you now have the option to specify the directory that you're going to generate into, as well as the casing of the file name. So it's like camel case, Pascal case, a few other options in there, like none. You can have it as is, like as you type it. And this just lets it be a little bit more flexible, and it kind of helped prep for the next change that I'll talk about, which is the experimental Expo router flag. So if you're familiar with the experimental flag on Ignite, you can use certain versions of Expo, like Alpha, Beta, Canary, for example. Anything there's an NPM tag for, to be honest. Yeah. As well as new arc. You can pass in new-arc, and that'll swap you over to the new architecture. So now a new one is Expo-router. If you provide that on the CLI, we will actually switch up our directory structure. You'll now have a top-level source directory, SRC. The app directory inside of that will contain your routes, and then all of the other Ignite directories you're used to will be a sibling to that right under SRC. And with the generator changes, you can now generate screens properly in an Expo router setting, which requires you to, have more nested directories and not one screen directory, for example. But it's been really fun to play with that. This came out of inspiration for prepping for Chain React and the Expo router workshop I did with Ellie and Keith Carrick of Expo. I had to set this up in like 5 projects, I think, in a matter of a few weeks. And I got tired of doing that, so I built it in.
It sounds like a lot of Ignite, like I said, battle-tested stuff, so from client stuff, but also from workshops that we put together, talks that we put together that just kind of enlighten us to do all this research and stuff. That's pretty cool. So experimental Expo router still. Do you anticipate that coming out of experimental for V10, or just who knows at this point?
For V10, I'd say definitely not. Maybe at a patch version sometime in the future. We'll see what mid-October brings with SDK 52 and the next release of Expo Router. We've definitely left it as experimental. We are using on several client projects now, I think 3, 4, maybe.
I'm on a project where we're full Expo, top to bottom, and Expo Router, and I'm actually loving its flow.
Yeah. It's definitely been performing well in like 90% of the cases.
Mm-hmm.
There are some things modal related, crazy navigator, like nested related things we're hitting and working with Expo to iron out. So I think once those are more stable, we'll probably, and if that's what everyone's going to, I mean, then that's what we'll do to switch it. But for right now, it's a flag. It's pretty easy to get to.
So last line item here, not Ignite 10 related, but adjacent. Ignite Cookbook. We've mentioned a bunch of these. So there's a cookbook to swap out i18nJS for React i18 Next or i18 Next if you're an older version of Ignite. Frank also mentioned the new theming system that we have set up. It now plays nice with, third-party libraries like styled components, unistyles, and all that. It shows you how to handle that. And we also have another cookbook recipe for better monorepo support. That's something the community has also been asking for quite a bit. So there's that. Please, please, please give this a try. Post any issues that you come up with, fix anything that you see wrong, and just kind of start a conversation with us and we'll kind of talk about it. And like we said, most of these features kind of came out of issues that you all, the community, opened up, and we kind of compiled them all together, and Ignite 10 kind of grew from it. So please keep doing what you're doing, community. Before we close off, Frank, for those who already do not follow you, what's your handle on social? On Twitter, I'll never say X.
Twitter, GitHub, LinkedIn is all Frank Calise, Calise.
Give him a follow. Before we close out, I really want to shout out to everyone at Infinite Red who played a part in this release. Like Frank mentioned, a lot of different people played different parts in it. Frank, of course, being one of them. Felipe Pena, Lizzie Linbo, Mark Rickert, JP, or Justin Polachek. I know also Trevor Coleman, Josh Yos were helping us with some reviews, and same with Ryan Linton, and many others within the Infinite Red organization. And also, I'm sure some community members also helped out with this. So, huge kudos and shout out to all you all for helping out with this. Robin's not here to give a mom joke, so that's it. See you all next time.
As always, thanks to our editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor, me, Jed Bartosky, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.